I hope you guys are excited. We've got part 24, the same week as part 23. It's just magical. We are proudly sponsored by Graham Styling, who do automotive body parts, as well as DRS Canuck, which are mobile remappers. So please go check out their pages and give them a shout if you're interested in any of their products. We are discussing what we need to do with this engine in great detail. So for those people that are interested in doing an NAT conversion, you're going to want to watch this video. And I'd appreciate your feedback. So let's crack on with this video. So now that the engine is affixed to its stand, it's time to work on the engine. The exhaust manifold has been attached. The previous person we bought this from had great difficulty attaching the manifold. And it didn't take long to find out why. He was trying to use his own studs that he'd made using M10 threaded bar, and he was using standard M10 nuts, but the thread inside the head is not a standard thread, it is a fine thread. I believe it is 1.25 thread. So we have used the original Toyota bolts and the original Toyota nuts. He did try using some standard nuts on the Toyota threads, and all that happened was it went that far, cross-threaded, and ruined the stud without it being tapped out. So we have got all but one on the exhaust manifold. As you can see, we are missing the one that goes here. On our build, or whether it's this particular exhaust manifold or this series of exhaust manifolds, depends whether it's just a fault in this one, it is actually impossible for us to use the standard stud and nut because it hits the inside of the down tube for this cylinder. So what we're going to have to do is invest in a M10 capless bolt. For those that don't know what they are, imagine it as an ordinary bolt that you would put in, so not a stud, not a nut, an ordinary bolt that instead of having a socket on the end, it has a Allen key on the middle of it. So it's a nice round bolt, should be able to hopefully go in there and be able to tighten it up. That is the only way I believe we're going to do it. So that's what we're going to have to do for that. The exhaust, if I haven't spoke about it before, is a GT45. It is a T4 fitting which wants a T4 flange. That is a T4 flange with 3 out of the 4 studs currently in. It comes with this gasket, which is rubbish. I recommend not using it and buying a solid plate one. Once it gets delivered to our house, we shall show you in another episode what that is. But I will not be using this gasket, it's just on there for the time being. So now the manifold is on, excluding that because that's in the post, and obviously our gasket is in the post as well as. We have the wastegate attached, as you can see. We haven't attached the wastegate, that is how it was attached by the previous owner. I have no idea yet if we're going to have the clearance we need for the screamer pipe to come straight out here. Again, that is another part that is on order. That is a 50mm wastegate, and it wants a 50mm screamer pipe that comes off it, which, like I said, is on order. So when we get that, we shall fit that, and that'll probably be in the next video on this build anyway. So that is how the exhaust manifold looks for the time being. Let's go ahead and test fit the turbo. Okay, so the GT45 is currently sat on the 3 pins that we've already put in place. It's not bolted down or anything because I'll be taking it off very shortly. It is a very big, very large, and very heavy, so don't drop it on your toes. What this turbo goes to show is it will be impossible for me to use the original NA engine covers and the original NA intake manifold, because if we take a look at it, if you remember, or if you have your own, the intake manifold, although it was done very loosely, sits across the top. I know it's not exact, but it's roughly like that, and brackets on. there is no way we're going to be able to run the intake pipe up and over this red hot turbo, because it defeats the object of having the cold air from the intercooler, because it's going to have to sit above the hot exhaust on the way back in. Absolutely pointless, and very tight for room. When this is in the car, this edge of the turbo here pretty much sits up against the strut tower, or strut top, whatever you want to call it, so there will be very minimal room. So I haven't got any extra room. I'll put this down out of the way. We haven't got any extra room to run the pipe over the top for the intake. Which brings us on to the next thing. So with this turbo, we're going to have the inlet on here. The intercooler is going to have to come off here, depending on which angle we set it at, down around to the intercooler, and it's going to have to now come back up on the opposite side like a twin turbo manifold. The manifold here, or the inlet manifold, it's the original NA bottom half, and this bit, with the looks of it, it's from a company called XS Power, I believe. They make tubes just like this that you can bolt on to the bottom half, so you can do this sort of build. The only downside with that is we now need to source ourselves a throttle body. We need to measure up this so we can get the exact throttle body, but it's most likely going to be some sort of universal one. We're going to have to make sure we get a throttle position sensor, and somehow attach that in, as well as an idle control valve, and we're going to need to attach that in somehow. There's so many things wrong. Now we've got to change the inlet to this side. We also have to change the power steering reservoir, because the power steering reservoir can no longer sit here. So this is a twin turbo power steering pump. It will have two pipes, one on the end, I think there's one on the back, which go to the reservoir, and the reservoir gets mounted on the strut tower, so it's a remote location, so the pipes run over here to roughly where the reservoir would sit. We'll show you that at a later date, but that's another thing you have to change. So we've talked about the manifold, we've talked about the turbo, we've talked about the intake. The next thing to discuss is the ignition, because the ignition on an NA is a distributor. The distributor will not sit in. I can place it in. I shall come back to you. I'll place this in and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to refer to. And we're back, peeps. Right. So the distributor, although it's not timed up, is sat in, and it's sat in fully. But as you can see, it sits and nestles on the intake of the turbo, which is not good. Not only does the turbo not even sit down on its flange now, we can no longer have ignition. So we're at the point where, do we have a turbo, excuse dirty fingers, or do we have ignition? We need both. Well, we need ignition, we'd like a turbo, but we need both. So then, it gives us the choice of what to do next. With two choices. We could drop down to a smaller turbo, put a T3 turbo on and have a T3 flange, which would be smaller, it would reduce the size of the turbo. You could probably even have the original intake on, and it means you could run a distributor. But we don't want to do that. Do we really want to go for a smaller turbo? No. Right, so we're going to stick with the big giant turbo. Now we've got to change the ignition, as well as everything else we're changing. So that means we're going to have to go for coils. Coils will sit on top of every individual spark plug, and they will all be connected to a TT igniter, not an NA igniter. And for those that don't know what that is, I'll show you one. That right there is an NA igniter. You have 12 volt going into it, and then it has however many volts it takes to the distributor on the king lead, and that's the one that connects onto the middle pin of the distributor, just there. So we're going to have to change all this, and this is where I'm still doing research. So we've got to remove that and stick a TT igniter in. Then we need some sort of wiring harness to connect the coils and the TT igniter together. But it doesn't end there. To get this engine to run properly and safely, we're also going to need a cam sensor and a crank sensor. Now there's two options we can do, or two options that I found, maybe three options. You could remove the distributor, blank it up, weld yourself a cam sensor into the head and change for a twin turbo oil pump which has a crank sensor built in. Brilliant. You could replace this distributor and stick I think it's a 7M GTE crank position sensor module in. I don't know what the option is for the crank. I imagine it's again sticking the twin turbo oil pump in. Or you can remove the distributor cap on here, because inside of here we have a crank and a cam position sensor. That is why we have this plug here. So if you remove the cap, remove the rotor arm and that out the inside, and make something called a short cap, which should be about this high, you shall see that that will give us all the clearance we need. It removes all the end of this cap so we can have the big intake on, keeps the end of the distributor in there for the sensors, so everything runs perfectly fine, and we have the big giant turbo, and the turbo will sit flush. And we don't have to weld anything on the heads or anything. So that would be the option we're going to go for. I just need to do some more research. And last but not least, let's talk about fueling. Now, the standard NA engine comes with 6 330cc injectors, although that might be brilliant and fine for an NA, and you can use it while turboed, as long as you're only running about 350 brake. If you want to go more than that, you're going to need some bigger injectors. Now, one of the easiest things people go for are the 440cc injectors from the 7M GTE, which is the Mark III Supra. Now, I'm showing you these 6 injectors. I honestly couldn't tell you what they are. I've been told that they're the 440s, but I do not know, and I need to do some research into them. I need to get the serial numbers off them and check them off from there. But they're not just plug and play. You need to get some little adapter cables, as well as some inline resistors, because these are the opposite of the standard injectors. You've got high resistance and low resistance, and I believe these are the low ones, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me for that just yet. Come back to me in another video. So you need to upgrade. If you want to go for bigger power, you're going to need to upgrade the injectors. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to run the 440cc injectors, and eventually we'll go for even bigger ones. So bear that in mind, that you're going to need to do something about your fueling. Yeah, you could also go for an uprated fuel rail if you wanted, and at a later date we also have tucked up here an uprated fuel pump, which will be a video all on its own later in the series. So there's lots and lots of things to discuss about these engines. As you can see, we've got to deal with intake, exhaust, ignition and fueling. All 4 points of the engine. And then if you want to do the TT oil pump swap, then you've got oil related issues as well as. Last but not least, when we do move on to oil, if you look down here, you can just see the bottom of the oil filter housing. There are a couple of options you can do to get your oil feed for your turbo. You can get yourself a sandwich plate, which is what we'll be doing, which will sit here, and then the filter sits on the end. You could get yourself, I think it's a Lexus bolt, which holds on the oil filter housing, because they also got the 2JZ engine, which I think has a tap for an oil feed on the end. You could also tap into this bolt, so you could drill your own hole and tap an oil feed into the end, because obviously it's under pressure because it's just come from the oil pump. And that will give you the feed for your turbo, which you'll need to work around the engine and sit onto, obviously this will be upright or wherever it needs to be, but sit onto here to get the oil in, preferably upright so the oil can run down into the turbo. Then you've also got the oil return to deal with. which is the bigger one just there, which will be sat downwards. To do that, the easiest thing to do, I say easy, is to tap into the sump just like that. From what I've read and been told, you cannot do it while it's on the vehicle. You either need to drop the subframe or remove the engine. Now this is far too loose at the moment, and I can see weeps of oil just here, so I'm going to have to readjust this connection, but that is nice and tight and secure, but I will double check. And then all you need to do is make the pipe the right size and run it into the waist of the turbo. So that is all possible parts of this engine that we need to discuss. Thank you very much for watching part 24. I hope this has helped you people that's doing the NAT build. If you have any questions or can help us out, please like, subscribe, leave us a comment. And for those of you that really want to get involved, please go and join our Facebook page. You can like our page, and we also have a group that you can join for group discussions and share pictures of cars and whatnot. So please give them a like. Links are in the description. Peace, dudes. I have dirty fingers still. Peace, dudes. We'll see you in another video.